It was past midnight when the call came through to his Manhattan penthouse. Not a normal hour, not a normal call. Marcus jolted awake with that gut-wrenching instinct only a parent knows. The screen showed the house line from Chicago. He answered immediately. "Emma, Lily," he called out as he sat up. No greeting came back, no explanation, just a small voice, trembling, distant. "Daddy, she's stealing from you." Then silence. He called back. Once, twice, 3 times. Nothing. His reflection in the mirror showed a man of 37, face pale, eyes hollow, the faint scar on his jaw catching the dim light. He didn't need to understand the words fully. That voice wasn't a game. It was fear. As he pulled on his shirt, an uncomfortable memory surfaced. Dante, his right hand, sitting across from him days ago. "Marcus, something's off about Serena. Grace says the girls change when you're not home." He'd dismissed it. Paranoia. Old loyalty. Now those words felt like a warning he should never have ignored. He didn't alert security. He moved like a ghost through the penthouse and summoned his helicopter. Chicago before dawn. The city lights blurred beneath him as he tried the house again. Voicemail. His mind kept circling the same question. What had his daughter seen? He tried convincing himself it was a misunderstanding, a bad dream. But Emma didn't talk like that. Lily didn't call at midnight without reason. Something was happening inside his house. Something that shouldn't be. He remembered that last morning. The girls eating in silence. Serena smiling too perfectly. Lily looking away when he came near. Emma hugging him tighter than usual. He'd felt it then, that strange pull in his chest. He'd ignored it. Now, 30,000 feet above the ground, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt even when Catherine died in his arms 2 years ago. Guilt. For not being there. For choosing the Empire over his own blood. Again, the Chicago skyline rose in the distance. His jaw tightened. His eyes went cold. He didn't know what he'd find behind that door. But one thing was certain. After that call, nothing would ever be the same. Hey everyone, welcome to our story. If you're enjoying it, hit like, share with a friend, and subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Because what Marcus is about to discover will shatter everything he thought he knew about the woman he trusted most. But to understand how this shadow entered his home, we must go back to where the ice in Marcus's heart first formed. Marcus Blackwood was not always the man with eyes cold as steel and a heart sealed shut. 2 years ago, he still knew how to smile. Still knew how to hold his children without fearing he might break them. 2 years ago, he still had Catherine. That fateful night began like any other. Marcus and Catherine left the restaurant after their wedding anniversary dinner, walking hand in hand along a Chicago sidewalk. He remembers her laughter, the familiar scent of her perfume, the way she leaned her head against his shoulder while talking about Emma and Lily waiting at home. Then the gunshots rang out. 1 shot, 2 shots, 3 shots. Catherine collapsed into his arms, blood soaking through her white silk dress, seeping into his Armani jacket, spreading onto the cold pavement beneath them. He did not scream. He did not cry. He only held her and watched the light fade from her eyes like a candle burning down to its final wick. She whispered his name once. Then there was nothing. Marcus does not remember how long he sat there. He only remembers that when Dante arrived, he stood up, lifted his wife's body into the car, and spoke a single sentence. Find the one who did this. 2 weeks later, the man who ordered the hit died in a car accident. The vehicle lost control on a bridge, plunged into the Chicago River, and no body was ever recovered. No one asked questions. No one dared. Marcus Blackwood was not a man who forgave, and the Chicago underworld understood that well. But the enemy's death did not bring Catherine back. It only left behind a void Marcus did not know how to fill. He returned home to 2 3-year-old daughters who could not understand why their mother was not coming back. Emma asked every day. Lily simply stood by the window and waited. Marcus looked at them and saw Catherine in every feature, in every glance, in every laugh. The pain was too much. He could not bear it. So he did the only thing he knew how to do. He built walls. He pushed everyone away, even his own daughters. He left the house earlier, came home later, traveled more for work. He let Grace Sullivan, the elderly housekeeper who had been with the family since before he married Catherine, take care of Emma and Lily. He loved them. But every time he looked at them, he saw her. And every time he saw her, he was reminded that he had failed to protect the person he loved most. 4 months ago, a trusted lawyer introduced Serena Cross, a perfect file, experience caring for children in elite households. references from names Marcus knew and respected. She arrived with a gentle smile, a soft voice, and an ability to make the household run smoothly like a perfectly oiled machine. Marcus hired her not because Emma and Lily needed another caretaker. Grace was still there. The children were still cared for. He hired Serena because he needed someone to stand between him and them. A buffer, another wall, a reason to keep his distance without feeling guilty. He believed distance was protection. He believed that if he was not close, they would not become targets the way Catherine had. He believed love was a weakness, and weakness in his world meant death. He was wrong. He was completely wrong. And now, as the helicopter descends toward the landing pad in Chicago, as the city lights flicker below like lost stars, Marcus Blackwood realizes that while he was busy building walls to protect his children, he had allowed a predator to walk straight through the front door. 2 weeks before that fateful call, a woman stood before the iron gates of the Blackwood estate, positioning herself at an angle where the cameras couldn't clearly capture her face. One shoulder slightly turned, her gaze lowered just enough to appear humble while still observing everything around her. A habit learned by someone who had lived too long in the shadows and mastered the art of making herself invisible in order to survive. Her name was Wren Palmer, 27 years old, and she wasn't here looking for a job. She was here looking for answers. The interview took place in a secondary sitting room, where Serena Cross sat across from her with a folder in hand and a measured smile on her lips, and Wren recognized that look immediately, the look reserved for merchandise rather than human beings. The look used to calculate value before deciding what something was worth. Wren knew that look because she had been seen that way before, 9 years earlier in a windowless room by people who had decided her fate and her sister's fate, with numbers and nods. She answered every question in an even voice, revealing no regional accent and offering nothing that could be traced. And when Serena asked about her experience, she recited exactly what the forged file contained. When Serena asked why she wanted to work here, she said she needed stability, which was true, just not the whole truth. Wren was hired that same day, assigned to cleaning duties on the lower floor, given a wage she could live on, and lodging in the staff quarters behind the estate, and she accepted without hesitation because this was the opportunity she had waited 6 months for, ever since a small lead had brought her to Chicago, to the upper class, to names ordinary people never heard spoken aloud. Her sister Ivy had been missing for 9 years. The police had given up long ago, but Wren hadn't and couldn't. On her first day in the estate, Wren observed everything: exits and entrances, camera placements, everyone's schedules, memorizing who went where at what time, who spoke to whom and who avoided whose gaze. Survival skills learned during years in the foster care system, in homes where violence was the only language, during nights spent guarding the door to protect Ivy from the hands of those called responsible adults. She tugged her sleeve down to cover the old scar on her wrist, an unconscious habit whenever someone stared too long. By the 3rd day, Wren saw Emma and Lily for the first time as the 2 children came down the stairs with Serena, hand in hand and eyes lowered, not running, not laughing, not speaking, moving like small shadows with steps so light they barely made a sound, as if they had learned how not to take up space, not to draw attention, not to exist too much. Wren stood beside the cabinet she was wiping and watched them pass by. Emma, the one with blonde hair like her mother's, glancing at her for a second before quickly lowering her gaze. Lily, the one with dark hair like her father's, not even looking up. And Wren recognized something painfully familiar in the way they kept their heads down. It was the posture of children who had learned to be afraid, the way Ivy used to walk beside her during their darkest days when neither of them knew if they'd still be alive tomorrow. Wren came to this estate to find information about a trafficking network and clues about her sister. She didn't come to care about anyone else, and she didn't come to save anyone, because she had learned not to attach, not to hope, and not to let her heart soften in a world that waited to crush the weak. But when Emma looked at her with wary blue eyes, and when Lily walked as if she wished to dissolve into the air, Wren felt something twist sharply in her chest. She remembered Ivy. She remembered herself, and she knew she couldn't turn away. Not this time. 3 days after Wren began working, she was assigned to clean the study, a room at the end of the first-floor corridor with a heavy oak door, shelves rising to the ceiling, and the faint scent of leather and sandalwood lingering in the air. Wren worked in silence, wiping each book and arranging stacks of documents without opening a single one despite the itch in her fingers urging her to do so. Because she knew there was a camera in the room and she always knew. She was bent down cleaning the leg of the walnut desk when the sensation struck her. the feeling of being watched, not by a camera, but by a flesh and blood human standing directly behind her. She didn't turn around immediately. Ordinary people would have startled, jumped to their feet, stammered an apology. But Wren wasn't ordinary. She had lived too long among predators to know that panic marked prey. She rose slowly, turned, and faced Marcus Blackwood for the first time. He stood in the doorway, shoulder resting against the frame, arms crossed over his chest. He said nothing, only watched her with eyes gray and cold as steel. The eyes of a man accustomed to reading others while allowing no one to read him. The faint scar along his left jaw stood out under the warm light. Wren stood still. She didn't lower her head. She didn't step back. She didn't apologize for being there even though this was the task she'd been given. She simply stood with the cleaning cloth in her hand and waited. The silence stretched, thick and heavy like black honey between them. Finally Marcus spoke, his voice low and stripped of any emotion she could identify. "Who are you?" It wasn't a question. It was a demand. "Wren Palmer, I work here. I know you work here." Marcus stepped into the room and the door closed behind him. "My question is, who are you?" Wren didn't break eye contact. "I'm the cleaner." Just like the file says. Marcus moved closer, his movements panther smooth, each step soundless and perfectly controlled. He stopped less than a meter from her, close enough for her to see the early threads of silver at his temples, close enough to feel the weight of his presence pressing down like a weapon. He studied her, the calloused hands not belonging to an office worker, the old shirt pressed with care, the posture not that of someone used to serving, and the eyes, dark brown and steady, not flinching, not lowering even as he used silence to bear down on her. "You seem used to being stared at," Marcus said, his voice no louder than a whisper yet heavy as stone. "I'm used to worse things," Wren replied before she could stop herself. She knew instantly she'd said too much, but the words were already out, and she wasn't someone who took them back. Marcus's gaze shifted, not softening, not warming, just changing slightly, as if he'd placed her into a different category in his mind. One more dangerous or perhaps more interesting, and she wasn't sure which was worse. He didn't ask another question. He turned away as if the conversation had ended long before it actually had. At the door, he paused and spoke to Serena standing in the hallway, his voice carrying clearly. "Move her to the upper floor. I want the study cleaned properly." Serena answered in her familiar sweet tone. "Yes, Mr. Blackwood." But when Wren stepped out of the room, she caught Serena's eyes. The smile was still on the woman's lips, but her eyes were cold as ice, her hand gripping the tea tray so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Wren knew that look. It was the look of someone whose territory had just been threatened. It was the look of a hunter when an unfamiliar animal stepped onto her hunting ground. Wren lowered her head slightly and passed without a word. But inside her mind, a warning bell was ringing loud and sharp. She had just become a target, of whom and for what reason she didn't yet fully know, but she would find out. Working on the upper floor meant Wren could observe more, and what she saw kept her awake night after night. Emma and Lily lived in a world of invisible rules that only they seemed to understand. And Wren recognized it through small details most people would overlook, but she never did. Emma always glanced toward the front door before saying anything, as if checking whether someone might be listening. Lily hid food beneath her pillow, dry pieces of bread and small candies, as if she wasn't sure when the next meal would come. Neither child ever turned their back on Serena, not once. Wherever the woman stood in the room, the children's eyes tracked her the way one watches a snake that might strike at any moment. Wren cleaned the children's rooms in the mornings while they were at school, and watched Serena closely whenever Marcus was away, and the contrast was so stark it was frightening. When Marcus was home, Serena embodied gentleness and care, her voice sweet, her gestures attentive, her smile never fading. But when Marcus's car disappeared at the end of the driveway, when the doors closed and the house sank into silence, Serena changed, not suddenly but gradually, like a mask slipping away layer by layer. Her voice sharpened, her gaze hardened, the smile vanished as if it had never existed. One afternoon, as Wren was wiping the staircase, she saw Serena leading Emma down the hallway, her hand gripping the child's wrist, not the way an adult guides a child, but the way someone drags something that doesn't want to follow. Fingers clamped too tightly, tight enough to leave marks on Emma's pale skin. The girl didn't cry. She didn't say it hurt. She simply walked with her eyes lowered and her lips pressed together. Wren clenched the cleaning cloth until her knuckles turned white. She wanted to do something, to say something, but she knew she had no standing. She was only a housekeeper. She had no proof. She had nothing except what her eyes had seen, and in this world that wasn't enough. That evening, Wren passed by the children's room and heard Serena's voice through the half-open door, cold as ice. "Don't you dare cry. Your mother cried all the time, too. Look where it got her. She's still dead. And your father still leaves you here with me." Wren froze in the hallway. She heard muffled sobs being swallowed back, the trembling breath of a child trying not to make a sound. She wanted to rush in, to scream, to do anything to stop the poisonous words seeping into young, fragile minds. But she didn't. Not yet. She needed to know more. She needed to understand what she was facing. Wren stepped back, her movements silent, and disappeared into the shadows at the end of the corridor. But Serena's words followed her through the night. Isolation, control, belittlement, breaking the will. This wasn't how a bad nanny treated children. This was technique. This was method. This was how someone dismantled a human being from the inside, turning them into obedient creatures stripped of the will to resist. Wren had seen this before. 9 years ago, in windowless rooms where she and Ivy were held, where traffickers taught them how to stay silent, how to obey, how to stop being themselves. Wren stared at the ceiling in the darkness of her small room. She had come here to find clues about her sister, to find answers to 9 years of loss. But now she realized she was standing in the middle of something far bigger, and 2 children upstairs needed someone to see them before it was too late. 1 week before the trip to New York, Dante Corsetti walked into Marcus's office with the expression he reserved only for serious matters. Marcus was seated behind his desk, eyes fixed on the laptop screen, numbers and contracts occupying his mind completely. And he didn't look up when Dante closed the door behind him. "What is it?" Marcus asked without lifting his gaze. Dante didn't sit. He stood there with his arms crossed, silent long enough that Marcus finally looked up. Dante's eyes, the eyes of a man who had stood beside Marcus since the earliest days of building the empire, who had buried enemies with him and raised a kingdom from ashes, were fixed on him with something close to disappointment. "Grace called me," Dante said, his voice steady but heavy. "She says the girls aren't eating. They aren't sleeping. They aren't talking. It's been weeks." Marcus turned back to the screen. "They're adjusting. Children need time." "It's been 4 months," Dante pressed on. 4 months since Serena arrived. "The girls are getting worse, not better." Marcus stayed silent, his fingers hovering over the keyboard, but he didn't turn around. The silence stretched between them like an invisible wall. Dante exhaled and stepped closer. "And the new maid, Wren, she's noticed something too." This time Marcus turned, his gray eyes narrowing. "Who is she to have an opinion? She's the only person in this house the girls aren't afraid of." Dante replied without hesitation. "Grace says Emma asked about her. Asked if she was a good person. Children don't ask that question about someone they trust, Marcus. They ask it when they're searching for someone to trust." Marcus didn't answer. He looked at Dante for a long moment, then turned back to the screen as if the conversation had ended. "Grace is worrying too much. She never liked Serena from the start. This is personal bias, not evidence." Dante stood there a moment longer, his jaw tightening, then turned and walked toward the door. But before opening it, he stopped, his back still to Marcus. "You can ignore me," Dante said, his voice low but every word clear. "I'm just your subordinate. But don't ignore your daughters. They're trying to tell you something, and if you don't listen, you'll regret it." The door closed. Marcus remained motionless, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating his face. He didn't admit to himself that Dante's words had struck something deep inside him. He didn't admit that every time Emma lowered her head when he came close, every time Lily quietly pulled her hand away from his, it felt as though someone was tightening a fist around his heart. He didn't admit it, because admitting it meant acting, and acting meant facing what he had spent 2 years running from. Marcus returned to his work. The numbers on the screen danced before his eyes, but he didn't truly see them. In his mind, Dante's words echoed like an unending bell. "Don't ignore your daughters." He would carry those words with him throughout the trip to New York. He just didn't know that when he returned, it would already be too late for listening alone. That night, Wren couldn't sleep, Serena's words echoing in her mind like a toxic melody that wouldn't stop. "Your mother cried all the time, too. Look how much good it did." And she turned over on the narrow bed in the servants' quarters, staring up at the ceiling in the dark until she finally gave up. She needed water. She needed air. She needed to escape the 4 walls closing in on her. The estate was silent as a tomb when Wren slipped downstairs, her bare feet making no sound on the cold wooden floor. because she was used to moving in darkness, used to making herself invisible, a survival skill that had become an unbreakable habit. She had just stepped past the kitchen doorway when she froze. The adjacent living room wasn't completely dark as she'd assumed. A small lamp on the table by the window was lit, and within that faint circle of light, Marcus Blackwood was sitting alone. He didn't see her, or so she thought. He sat in a leather armchair with a glass of whiskey in his hand, his gaze fixed on the window where city lights flickered in the distance, his silhouette reflected in the glass like a lonely statue. Wren was about to step back, to disappear as if she'd never been there, when Marcus's voice cut through the darkness, low and stripped of emotion. "What are you looking for in my house?" Wren went still. Her heart pounded harder, but she didn't let it show on her face. He didn't turn around. He kept staring out the window as if he were speaking to his own reflection. "Don't lie," Marcus continued, his voice even. "I don't like being lied to, and I always know when someone is lying." Wren swallowed. She had two choices: lie and hope he believed her, or tell part of the truth and hope it was enough to keep him from digging deeper. "I'm looking for work," she said calmly. Marcus turned for the first time. His gray eyes met her brown ones in the darkness, and Wren felt as if he were seeing straight through every layer she'd built to protect herself. "No," he said simply. "You're looking for something. Or someone." Silence stretched between them. Wren knew she couldn't escape with another lie. This man had built an empire by reading people. He wasn't a fool, and she wouldn't insult him by pretending he was. She decided to gamble. "I'm looking for my sister," Wren said, her voice steady but lower. "She went missing 9 years ago. I've heard the Chicago underworld knows everything that happens in this city." Marcus studied her for a long moment without speaking. Wren couldn't tell what he was thinking behind those cold eyes. She didn't know whether he would throw her out or something worse. Then he stood, the whiskey glass still in his hand, walked past her with the faint scent of sandalwood and alcohol, and stopped at the doorway. "If you're looking for someone," he said without turning back, "you need to speak to the right person, not go digging through someone else's office." Wren startled. "You knew I was in the office." "I know everything that happens in this house," Marcus replied, "except one thing." "What?" "Why my daughters are afraid of the person I hired to protect them." The words hung in the air like a confession. Wren watched Marcus's back as he disappeared into the dark hallway, leaving her alone in the cold kitchen with a realization settling in her chest. She wasn't the only one seeing the cracks in this house. Marcus saw them too. He just didn't know what to do with what he was seeing, or he was too afraid to act. The conversation that night with Marcus changed everything because he knew she had been in the office. He knew she was searching for something, yet he didn't throw her out, and he even admitted that he too was beginning to doubt Serena, which meant Wren was no longer completely alone, and also meant she needed to move faster. 2 days later, while Serena took the children to their routine dental appointment, and Marcus was still at his office in the city, Wren decided to take the risk. She knew the camera placements in the house. She knew which blind spots were safe, and she had spent 2 weeks watching and memorizing, and now it was time to use what she knew. Marcus's office was still locked, but it wasn't where she needed to look. This time she went for Serena's room, located at the end of the second-floor hallway near the children's rooms, the perfect position to monitor them at all times. Wren opened the door with a master key she'd hidden since her first week. Inside, the room was unnaturally tidy. No family photos, no personal keepsakes, no trace of a life before this place. Only clothes in the closet, cosmetics on the vanity, and a suitcase tucked beneath the bed. Wren pulled the suitcase out and opened it with a hairpin, and inside were the things Serena never wanted anyone to see, a thick folder that made Wren's blood run cold as she flipped through it. Serena Cross's file was too perfect, too clean, without a single stain, gap, or questionable detail, and that was exactly the problem because no one had a background this pristine unless it was built so no one would ask questions. What stole Wren's breath were the photographs beneath it. Images of different families, middle-aged men, widowed or single, with young children beside them, each photo marked with notes listing names, addresses, estimated income, number of children, and ages. Some names crossed out with a single word written beside them in red ink, completed. On the final page, Wren saw a familiar photograph, Marcus Blackwood standing in front of this very estate with Emma and Lily at his sides, and next to it a handwritten note. High-value target. Twin girls, 5 years old, widowed father, wealthy, frequently absent, status in progress. Wren felt nauseous because she knew exactly what she was looking at. This wasn't the file of a nanny. It was the file of a predator. a target list belonging to a trafficking ring, and she knew precisely where she was. At that moment, the door opened behind her. Ren turned to see Serena standing in the doorway, the smile gone from her face, replaced by eyes cold as ice, sharp as knives, and no longer hiding anything at all. "What are you looking for in my room?" Serena asked, her voice even but threaded with unmistakable threat. Ren rose slowly, without rushing and without panic, because she'd faced far more dangerous people than Serena and survived worse situations than this. "I'm cleaning," Ren replied calmly. Serena stepped inside and closed the door behind her, the click of the lock sounding like a declaration. "You know, I've met many people like you," Serena said as she moved closer step by step. "People who think they're smart, people who think they can dig without being noticed, and they usually end up in places no one ever finds." Ren didn't retreat. She stood her ground, brown eyes fixed on Serena's gray-blue stare. "I've met many people like you too," Ren replied slowly, "and they usually end up behind bars, or worse." The silence between them stretched tight as a drawn wire, ready to snap. Serena tilted her head, studying Ren with something like curiosity, then smiled, though the smile never reached her eyes. "Be careful, Ren," Serena said, her voice sweet like honey laced with poison. "You don't know who you're playing with, and people who don't know the rules are usually the first to lose." She stepped aside and opened the door, a wordless invitation for Ren to leave. Ren crossed the threshold without looking back, but she knew Serena wasn't an ordinary employee. She was a hunter, and Emma and Lily were prey she had already marked. Ren also knew something else now. Serena knew she was a threat, and in the world of predators, threats had to be eliminated. The race against time had begun. On the morning Marcus left for New York, the Blackwood estate sank into an unusually heavy silence as early sunlight streamed through the dining room windows, illuminating a perfectly set breakfast table that no one truly wanted to eat from. Emma sat in front of her plate of pancakes, her small hands resting in her lap, her eyes lowered, not touching the food even though it had once been her favorite. Beside her, Lily was even quieter, sitting motionless like a small statue, her gaze fixed on the tabletop, never lifting her eyes even once. From time to time, the sisters glanced at each other, exchanging a wordless language only they understood, before lowering their heads again. Serena moved around the table with her familiar grace, pouring coffee for Marcus, straightening napkins, smiling at precisely the right moments. The smile perfect, the gestures perfect, everything so flawless it bordered on artificial if anyone cared to look closely. But Marcus didn't look closely at all. He was checking his phone, his mind already in New York long before his body would leave Chicago. Ren stood in the corner of the kitchen, pretending to organize things, but her eyes never left the table, and she saw everything. The way Emma nudged her plate aside with a movement so small it was almost invisible. The way Lily clenched the hem of her shirt beneath the table. The way both children shrank inward whenever Serena passed behind them. And she also saw the way Serena glanced toward her, a look quick as lightning yet clear in its message. "I'm watching you." Marcus set his coffee cup down and stood, bending to the children's eye level. And in that moment, Ren saw something soft flicker through his cold gray eyes. "Daddy's going away for a few days, and then he'll be back," he said, his voice lower and gentler than usual. "If you need anything, call Daddy, all right." Emma looked up, her blue eyes like her mother's fixed on him with something that hovered between hope and desperation. "Daddy, when will you come back?" "In a few days," Marcus answered. Emma didn't blink. "Do you promise?" Marcus hesitated for a second long enough for Ren to notice, and long enough for Emma to notice. Then he nodded. "I promise." Lily said nothing. She stood, walked over to Marcus, and hugged him, her small arms clutching his suit jacket as if it were the only lifeline she had. She didn't cry or speak. She only held on with all the strength a 5-year-old child could muster, trying to keep something she felt slipping away. Marcus patted her back gently, then carefully loosened her grip. He straightened, exchanged a few words with Serena about the schedule, and walked out the door. Ren stood there watching his retreating figure, wanting to run after him, wanting to shout, wanting to tell him not to go, that something was about to happen, that the children were trying to tell him something he refused to hear. But she had no proof, only instinct and fragments that hadn't yet formed a whole. The sound of an engine roared outside. Ren looked through the window and watched the black SUV carrying Marcus roll down the gravel drive and disappear beyond the iron gates. Instantly, the air inside the estate changed. Serena stepped to the front door and closed it with a soft thud, the click of the lock echoing through the silence like a sentence being passed. Then she turned back, and the smile on her lips vanished like a candle blown out. Emma and Lily stood frozen in the dining room, two small figures holding hands, their eyes lowered, knowing what was coming, and Wren, standing in the kitchen corner with her hands clenched around the edge of her apron, knew it too. Darkness had swallowed the Blackwood estate in the middle of the day. The moment the sound of Marcus's engine faded at the end of the road, Serena Cross became someone entirely different. The gentle smile gone, the sweet voice gone, the caring gestures erased, leaving a woman standing in the living room who was cold as steel, sharp as a blade, and no longer bothering to hide her true nature. Upstairs. Now, Serena ordered Emma and Lily, her voice hard as stone. The children didn't resist because they'd learned long ago not to resist. They only lowered their heads and climbed the stairs on small legs, taking each step as if walking toward a place they knew held nothing good for them. Wren watched from the corner of the kitchen, her heart tightening, wanting to run after them, to pull them back, to do something, anything. But Serena turned toward her before she could move. "And you," Serena said, gray-blue eyes fixing on Wren as if she were an irritating insect. "You've got work downstairs. Don't go upstairs. Don't go into the children's room. Don't interfere in my business. Understood?" Wren clenched the edge of her apron, every instinct screaming at her to confront, to act, to stop this now. But her mind knew she didn't yet have what she needed. No solid evidence, no support, no plan, and if she acted now and failed, Serena would remove her, and the children would have no one left to see them. "Yes," Wren replied, her voice so steady it surprised even herself. "I understand." Serena studied her for a long moment as if weighing whether to believe her, then turned and walked up the stairs, her heels striking the wood like the countdown of a bomb. The hours that followed were hell. Wren worked downstairs as ordered, her ears straining for every sound from above, the heavy footsteps of Serena, doors slamming, a sharp voice filtering through the ceiling, though she couldn't make out every word, and worst of all, the silence of children who'd learned not to cry, not to call out, not to make any sound that might make things worse. By noon, Wren couldn't take it anymore. She crept up the stairs, her steps silent, and stopped outside the children's room. The door was shut tight, no sound from within. She placed her hand on the knob and it didn't move, locked from the outside. Serena had locked the children in. Rage flared in Wren's chest, hot and violent, because she knew what it felt like to be locked in a room. She knew the darkness, the loneliness, the terror of not knowing when the door would open or what it would bring, because she and Ivy had been in rooms like that 9 years ago. That night, when Serena finally went to bed, Wren slipped upstairs again and used her master key to open the children's door. Her heart pounding, the room was pitch dark. No nightlight, no glow from the window because the curtains were drawn tight. In the thick darkness, Wren saw two small shapes curled together in the corner of the bed, hands clasped, eyes wide and staring into nothing. Emma and Lily weren't crying. They'd passed that stage long ago. They just sat there motionless like two small animals that had accepted their fate inside a cage. Wren knelt beside the bed and kept her voice gentle. "Are you hungry?" Emma shook her head, but her eyes said otherwise. Lily didn't react at all, only tightened her grip on her sister's hand. Wren pulled a piece of bread and some cheese from her pocket, food she'd hidden from dinner, and placed it in Emma's hands. The girl looked down at the food, then up at Wren with eyes filled with fear and hope at once. "Are you a good person?" Emma asked, her voice so soft Wren had to lean closer to hear it. Wren didn't know how to answer. She didn't think she was a good person. She'd done things to survive that good people wouldn't do. She'd lied, deceived, used others. But looking into those blue eyes waiting for an answer, she could only say one thing. "I don't know if I'm a good person," she whispered, "but I won't let anyone hurt you. I promise." Lily spoke for the first time, her voice hoarse as if she hadn't spoken in a long while. "She says Mommy left because we were bad. She says Daddy doesn't love us. That's why he's always gone. She says nobody wants us." It felt as if a knife had been driven into Wren's chest. Rage surging so fiercely she had to clench her teeth to keep from screaming. But she swallowed it down because the children didn't need her anger. They needed calm. They needed to see someone stronger than their fear. "That's a lie," Wren said, her voice firm even as her heart broke. "Your mother loved you very much, and your father loves you too. Never believe what she says. Never." Emma looked at her, then slowly lifted the bread to her mouth. Lily picked up the cheese and ate quietly, as if afraid someone might hear. Wren stayed there in the darkness, watching over them as they ate, knowing one thing with absolute clarity: she couldn't wait any longer. She had to act, even if it meant risking everything she had. That night, Wren didn't sleep. Lying on the narrow bed in her small room with her eyes fixed on the ceiling, her mind spinning with what she had witnessed and what she knew was coming, the photographs in Serena's suitcase, the list of families marked with the word completed, the way Serena treated Emma and Lily when no one was watching, all the pieces locking together into a horrifying picture Wren couldn't ignore. She had to do something. Now, near midnight, Wren slipped out of her room and moved through the darkness like a shadow. Knowing Serena's routine, knowing the woman always drank a glass of liquor before bed and wouldn't leave her room until morning, knowing this was the only chance, Wren unlocked the children's room and slipped inside, finding Emma and Lily still awake, curled together on the bed as if they were waiting for something. Maybe waiting for Wren. Maybe waiting for anyone to come and tell them everything would be all right. Wren knelt beside the bed and pulled from her pocket the old phone she'd hidden since her first day here. The phone she used to contact underworld sources while searching for Ivy, now meant for something else. "Emma," Wren whispered, holding the phone out to her. "You need to call your dad. Tell him you're scared. Tell him something's wrong. Say anything to make him come home." Emma stared at the phone as if it were something from another world, her blue eyes wide with fear tangled with hope. But she whispered that Serena said they weren't allowed to call, that if they told anyone something bad would happen. Wren took Emma's small hands and squeezed gently. "Don't listen to her," she said, her voice firm even as her heart hammered. "Your dad will believe you. Your dad loves you. You just need to call and tell the truth. Do you trust me?" Emma looked at Wren for a long moment, then glanced at Lily, and the sisters exchanged that silent look only they understood, and Lily gave a small nod. Emma turned back, took a deep breath, and picked up the phone as Wren dialed Marcus's number from the contacts she'd found in the personnel file. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, then clicked, and Marcus's voice came through, worried despite his attempt at calm. "Emma, Lily." Emma clutched the phone, her whole body trembling, opening her mouth but no sound coming out, until Wren rested a hand on her shoulder and whispered that she could do it. Emma closed her eyes, finally finding the courage to speak the words that would ignite the storm. "Daddy, she's stealing from you." That was all, one short sentence without explanation or detail. But Wren knew it was everything Emma could give in that moment, the cry for help of a child silenced for too long. At that exact moment, the bedroom door flew open, and Serena stood in the doorway, hair loose, eyes blazing with undisguised fury, lunging forward to snatch the phone from Emma's hand and cut the call before Marcus could say another word. "What do you think you're doing?" Serena shrieked, turning on Wren, her voice sharp as breaking glass. "Who do you think you are to interfere in my business?" Wren stood and placed herself between Serena and the children, not stepping back, not shaking, meeting the predator's gaze with chilling calm. "I'm the one who won't let you touch these children," she said. Serena laughed, a sound cold as ice, calling Wren brave before turning and shouting for help. 2 figures appeared in the doorway, men Wren had never seen in the estate, men who clearly weren't ordinary staff, tall, hard-faced, their eyes fixing on Wren like a problem to be handled. "Take her to the basement," Serena ordered. "I'll deal with her later." Wren fought, but they were too strong, dragging her from the room, down the stairs, through dark corridors, while Emma's scream tore through the house behind her and through Wren's heart, calling her name again and again until the basement door slammed shut and darkness swallowed everything. They tied her to an old chair without a word and left. Footsteps fading, the lock clicking like a verdict. Wren sat alone in the basement darkness, wrists burning from the ropes, lips split from a slap, not knowing whether the call had reached Marcus in time, not knowing whether he'd heard Emma's words, not knowing whether she'd lived through the night, but knowing one thing for certain: she had tried, and sometimes trying was all anyone could do. Marcus's helicopter touched down on a private landing pad outside Chicago before the sky had fully lightened, and he didn't wait for the blades to slow, didn't wait for the pilot to shut down the engine, didn't wait for anything at all. He jumped out and charged toward the black SUV already waiting. Where Dante stood with a tension on his face Marcus rarely saw. "What happened?" Marcus demanded as he opened the car door, his voice sharp as a blade. Dante shook his head, worry etched deep into his features. "I don't know. I've been calling the house since I heard you were flying back." No one answered. Not Serena. Not Grace. No one. Marcus clenched his jaw. "Drive. Now." The SUV tore through the streets of Chicago in the pale light of dawn, the engine roaring like a hunting animal, while Marcus sat in the back seat staring straight ahead though his mind was elsewhere. Emma's voice echoed in his head, small and shaking. "Daddy, she's stealing from you." He didn't understand what the words meant, but he understood the fear behind them, the plea buried inside that single sentence, and he understood that he had missed too many signs. The car screeched to a halt at the estate gates. Marcus was out before the engine even cut, running for the front door, which wasn't locked. He shoved it open and stopped. Silence. The house was drowned in a silence so thick it felt wrong. No footsteps, no voices, no sound of children laughing, nothing but a hollow emptiness like a tomb. "Emma!" Marcus shouted, his voice echoing through the vast space. "Lily." No answer. He took the stairs 2 at a time and kicked open the children's bedroom door. Empty. The beds unmade. Toys scattered across the floor. But no children. Dante appeared behind him with a phone pressed to his ear. "I just spoke to Grace. Serena sent her on leave yesterday, said there was a replacement." Grace didn't know anything about what was happening. Marcus's fists tightened as rage ignited in his chest. "Where is Serena? Where are my daughters?" Dante checked his watch. "It's 6 in the morning. Normally the girls leave for school at 8, but the school isn't open this early." Marcus was about to speak when a sound drifted up from somewhere below, a faint noise like knocking, coming from the basement. The 2 men exchanged a look and rushed down the stairs. The basement door was locked from the outside. Marcus shattered the lock with a single kick and stormed inside. The basement was pitch dark, the air thick with damp and rot. Dante's phone light swept across the space and stopped in a corner. Wren was there, tied to an old chair, her face bruised, her lips split, but her eyes burning bright when she saw them. Marcus lunged forward, his hands shaking as he cut the ropes free, not knowing why they trembled, not knowing why his chest tightened at the sight of her injuries, only knowing he had to get her out and he had to find his daughters. "Where are the girls?" he demanded the moment the last rope fell away. Wren coughed, her voice hoarse but clear. "School." She took them to school. There was a pickup van, a trafficking ring. "What ring?" Marcus snapped, gripping Wren's shoulders, his gray eyes blazing. "What are you talking about?" Wren met his gaze without flinching, without fear, even after a night of hell. "Serena Cross is part of a trafficking ring that targets wealthy single-parent families with young children. She isn't a nanny, she's a predator, and Emma and Lily are her next targets. I saw the files. I saw the list. Other families too. Some marked completed." It felt as if a fist slammed into Marcus's chest, the world spinning for a brief second before everything snapped into terrifying clarity. He straightened and turned to Dante, his voice cold as ice and carrying a fury that could burn a city to ash. "Call Harrison, the FBI. Tell them there's an active child abduction at Northbrook Academy, and get my team ready." Dante nodded and started dialing immediately. Marcus turned back to Wren. She was on her feet now, unsteady but upright. "Can you walk?" he asked. Wren looked at him, her brown eyes lit with a fire he recognized, the fire of someone who had lost too much and refused to lose more, the fire of someone willing to burn the world to protect what they loved. "I didn't come here to stand by," Wren said, moving toward the stairs, and though her legs shook, she didn't stop. Marcus watched her for a moment, then followed. There was no time for fear, no time for regret, only time to act. The SUV roared out of the estate gates toward Northbrook Academy, and inside the vehicle Marcus clenched his fist against the door handle, his eyes cold as steel while a storm raged within. He had missed too many signs. He had ignored too many warnings. He had let a predator into his home and threaten his daughters under his own roof, but he wouldn't let her finish what she'd started. Even if he had to burn all of Chicago to the ground, he would bring his daughters home, or someone would pay in blood. Northbrook Academy, a private school tucked into a quiet neighborhood in the northern suburbs of Chicago, stood behind rows of century-old oak trees, its historic red brick buildings serving the children of the city's wealthiest families, a place where security cameras watched every corner and strict procedures governed every movement. Yet that morning all those protections were useless against a predator who had planned every step in advance. Serena Cross arrived at 7:45 in the morning, 15 minutes before official opening time, dressed in an elegant gray suit with her hair neatly pinned back and a flawless smile on her lips, carrying a stack of documents that looked impeccably official, complete with stamps and perfectly forged signatures. "I need to take Emma and Lily Blackwood immediately," she told the receptionist in a voice urgent yet composed. "There's a family emergency. Their father has authorized me." The receptionist, a middle-aged woman named Margaret, studied the papers with hesitation. "Our procedure requires direct confirmation from a parent before releasing a student early." "This is an emergency," Serena pressed, her tone sharpening slightly. "Mr. Blackwood is on his way to the hospital and can't make a call right now. Please understand. Margaret hesitated one more second, then picked up the phone to call the office. And a few minutes later, Teacher Evelyn Marsh escorted Emma and Lily into the main lobby. The girls walked slowly, hands clenched together, eyes fixed on the floor, and Evelyn noticed immediately. In her 2 years of teaching, she'd seen many children reluctant to go home for all kinds of reasons, but she'd never seen fear this stark. Emma didn't run to Serena the way a child normally would when seeing someone familiar. Instead, she tightened her grip on her teacher's hand as if clinging to a final lifeline, while beside her Lily cried without sound, tears streaming down her cheeks but no noise escaping. Evelyn knelt to their level. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. "Emma doesn't want to go," Emma whispered, her voice trembling. "Emma wants to stay with you." Serena stepped forward, her smile stretched tight. "Don't be silly," she said sweetly, though her eyes were cold as ice. "We have to go now. Daddy's waiting." Evelyn stood, every teacher instinct and child protection instinct rising at once. "I need to confirm with Mr. Blackwood first," she said calmly but firmly. "It's required procedure. There's no time." Serena moved to grab Emma's hand, but Evelyn blocked her. "I'm sorry, but I can't allow anyone to remove a student without parental confirmation. That's the rule." For a split second, Serena's eyes changed, the gentle mask slipping to reveal something cold and dangerous beneath. Then she smiled lightly, as if it were all a misunderstanding. "Fine," she said. "I'll wait," but Evelyn had seen enough. She turned to Margaret at the desk and said a single word: "Lockdown." Margaret understood instantly and pressed the button beneath the desk. Alarms sounding throughout the school within seconds as the front doors automatically locked. Classroom doors slammed shut, and teachers began ushering students into secure areas. Serena cursed and tried to drag Emma toward a side exit, but that door had already locked too, and she spun back, eyes scanning the lobby like a cornered animal. Outside, police sirens began to wail in the distance, quickly drawing closer. Someone had called the police. Maybe Margaret, maybe Evelyn, or maybe the FBI call Dante had placed on the way. Serena knew she was out of time. She released Emma's hand and backed toward the staff exit, but when she turned, she found herself face to face with Marcus Blackwood, standing like a wall of steel, gray eyes cold as ice with hell burning behind them, Dante blocking the only remaining escape beside him, and Ren stepping in behind them, face bruised and lips split yet standing upright like a warrior who'd survived battle. "You touched my children," Marcus said, his voice so low and cold the air itself seemed to freeze. "You thought you could touch my children and walk away." Serena laughed, a hollow, icy sound. "You don't understand who you're dealing with, Blackwood. Victor Kane isn't someone you want as an enemy. He's got people everywhere and he won't let this go." "I don't care who Victor Kane is," Marcus stepped forward, each footfall heavy and deliberate. "I only care that you end up where you belong, behind bars, or 6 feet underground. Your choice." The front doors burst open as police flooded in, weapons drawn, FBI agents leading the charge, and Detective Cole Harrison, who'd been tracking Victor Kane's network for years without enough proof, saw Serena Cross and knew instantly. "Cuff her," Harrison ordered. "Serena Cross, you're under arrest for conspiracy to kidnap and suspected involvement in an interstate trafficking ring. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in court." As the cuffs snapped around Serena's wrists, Emma and Lily ran to Marcus, and he dropped to his knees, opening his arms, and for the first time in 2 years he held his daughters as if his life depended on it. Emma sobbed into his shoulder, the sound breaking free after too many silent days, while Lily clung to his neck, her whole body shaking. Marcus didn't speak. He only held them, holding on as if letting go would make them vanish, holding on as if this were his last chance to do so. And a few steps away, Ren stood watching, tears blurring her vision, not knowing exactly why she was crying, only knowing that for the first time in many years, she felt she'd done something right, and for the first time she felt that hope wasn't a foolish thing after all. The FBI headquarters in Chicago stood inside a tall glass building in the heart of the city, cold and impersonal like the work carried out within its walls, and that night Serena Cross sat in an interrogation room with cuffs still locked around her wrists, her once perfectly styled hair now loose and disordered, her gray-blue eyes still cold but stripped of their former arrogance. Behind the one-way glass, Marcus and Ren stood in silence watching, while Emma and Lily had already been taken home by Grace to the estate, where Dante's security team stood guard through the night, leaving Marcus free at last to focus on something else, making sure Serena Cross and everyone behind her paid the price. Detective Cole Harrison entered the room carrying a thick file, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and the sharp eyes of someone who had spent his life hunting traffickers. And he sat across from Serena, set the folder on the table, and opened it slowly. "We have your file, Serena," Harrison said calmly, as if discussing the weather. "Or should I call you Sarah? Or Sandra? How many identities have you used over the past 12 years? Serena said nothing, only stared back with empty eyes, and Harrison continued. "We also have evidence from the Blackwood estate, target lists, photographs, notes. You weren't as careful as you thought, Serena, or you believed you'd never be caught." Silence hung heavy as Harrison leaned forward. "Do you know the penalty for interstate human trafficking? Federal capital punishment. That's if you don't cooperate. But if you give us Victor Kane and his network, we might consider a reduced sentence." For the first time, a crack appeared in Serena's composure as she glanced toward the one-way glass, as if sensing someone there. "If I talk," she said hoarsely, "I want protection. Victor doesn't forgive traitors." "You'll be protected," Harrison nodded. "Start talking." And Serena talked, revealing that Victor Kane's network had operated for more than 12 years across the Midwest, Chicago, Detroit, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, targeting wealthy families, especially widowed or single fathers with young children, with Serena acting as one of the recruiters who infiltrated target households under the guise of a nanny or housekeeper. "How many victims?" Harrison asked. Serena hesitated. "Hundreds, over the years. I don't know the exact number. I was just one link in the chain." Outside the room, Marcus clenched his fists, rage surging in his chest. Hundreds of children, hundreds of families destroyed, and he had almost become one of them. Inside, Harrison pressed on about Victor Kane's location, operating sites, accomplices. And Serena gave details piece by piece, her voice trembling more with each word as she realized she was burying Victor alive. Harrison stepped out to confer with colleagues, then turned to Marcus and Wren. "She's cooperating," he said. "But Victor Kane is a big target. We need time to verify everything." "Let me in," Marcus said coldly. "Can't do that." Harrison shook his head. "You're not law enforcement." But he glanced at Wren. "She can be." Wren blinked. "Me. She has information Serena can confirm," Harrison explained. "About her sister. If she asks directly, Serena might answer." Wren's heart pounded as she looked at Marcus, and he gave a small nod, and she entered the interrogation room, facing the woman who had locked her in the basement hours earlier. Serena looked up, eyes widening. "Ah, the curious maid," she sneered. Wren ignored the taunt, sat down, placed her hands on the table, and met the predator's gaze. "Ivy Sullivan," Wren said steadily despite her racing heart. 24 years old, taken in Milwaukee 9 years ago. "You know where she is?" Serena tilted her head, studying Wren like an odd specimen. "You're the sister of old merchandise." Wren didn't react. She waited. And after a long silence, Serena sighed as if accepting the inevitable. "Ivy Sullivan," she murmured, searching her memory. "I remember that file. She was sold to a client in Detroit at first, but the deal failed. Too stubborn. Wouldn't comply." "Where is she now?" Wren asked, her voice trembling despite herself. "Detroit," Serena replied. "There's a garment factory on the outskirts. Victor keeps the ones who can't be sold there. They work until they can't anymore. If your sister is still alive, she's there." Wren stood, her legs shaking but her resolve intact, and stepped out to face Marcus waiting outside. "Detroit," she said firmly. "She's in Detroit." Marcus studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "We're going there, together." Wren didn't thank him. She only nodded back. But in that moment she felt something she hadn't felt in 9 long years. Hope. 48 hours later, the convoy moved quietly into an abandoned industrial zone on the outskirts of Detroit. The sky still pitch black at 5 in the morning, the hour when darkness was at its deepest before dawn tore open the horizon, the perfect moment for a raid when prey still drifted in half sleep and the hunter became the hunted. The FBI coordinated with Detroit SWAT, 12 armored vehicles, more than 50 tactical officers, and a search warrant signed by a federal judge, but trailing behind the official convoy was a black SUV with no government plates, and inside sat Marcus Blackwood with eyes cold as steel, Dante beside him along with 3 men from his private team. Harrison had argued against Marcus's presence, insisting this was an FBI operation with no place for civilians. But Marcus wasn't a civilian. He was Marcus Blackwood, and in Chicago as well as Detroit, that name opened more doors than any badge. So in the end, Harrison relented, allowing him to come as an advisor on the condition that he wouldn't carry a weapon and would stay back until the site was secured, a condition Marcus accepted because he didn't need a gun to deal with Victor Kane if the chance came. The garment factory occupied an old red brick building, once a thriving textile mill during Detroit's industrial peak before the city collapsed. Now nothing more than a hollow shell with boarded windows and razor wire fencing, a place that from the outside gave no hint that anyone lived within, exactly as Victor Kane intended. The signal went out at 5:15. SWAT breached from 4 directions simultaneously, explosives blowing doors apart, the blast rolling through the dawn like thunder announcing a storm, the FBI moving in right behind them, and in less than 3 minutes, the building was fully contained. Inside, chaos erupted, screams, running footsteps, scattered gunfire, as a few guards tried to resist, but they never stood a chance. SWAT neutralized and cuffed them in seconds. When the lower floor was declared secure, Marcus entered, ignoring the guards face down on the concrete and the agents searching every corner, focused on one thing alone: Victor Kane. The scene inside the factory tightened even Marcus's jaw. Rows of industrial sewing machines stretched across the floor, and seated at each one was a person. Mostly women and underage girls, gaunt, pale, eyes hollow from exhaustion and malnutrition, staring at the SWAT team with blank expressions like ghosts who'd forgotten how to live. 23 people, Harrison read aloud as agents began counting. My God, 23 lives stolen and trapped in this hell. Wren would want to know this, but she wasn't here. Marcus had insisted she stay in Chicago with Emma and Lily, unwilling to let her see what might have happened to her sister over the past 9 years. Harrison's radio crackled. We've got Kane, 2nd floor, East office. Marcus didn't wait for permission. He charged up the stairs past protesting agents and kicked the office door open. Victor Kane stood inside, documents burning in a metal trash bin, a man in his mid-40s with slicked-back salt and pepper hair and a black suit that made him look like a respectable businessman, except for his eyes, the eyes of a predator long accustomed to hunting without remorse. 2 SWAT officers cuffed him before Marcus could get close, and Victor looked at Marcus with open curiosity, as if meeting an interesting opponent across a chessboard. Blackwood, he said calmly, infuriatingly so. I've heard about you. You think you've won. Marcus didn't answer. He simply stared at the man who'd nearly taken his daughters, eyes frozen. Victor laughed, hollow and cold. This is just one link. Blackwood. Cut 1 and 10 grow back. You can't destroy something that's rooted this deep. Marcus still didn't respond. He hadn't come to argue with a trafficker. He'd come to watch him in cuffs, and that was enough. As Victor Kane was let out, Harrison approached Marcus, holding a sheet of paper. We found this in his files. About Ivy Sullivan. She's not here. She was transferred to another location. An apartment outside Detroit. This is the address. Marcus took the paper, staring at the address written in blue ink. 9 years Wren had searched for her sister, and the answer was less than 20 minutes away. He pulled out his phone and called Wren, and when she answered, he said only one thing. Come to Detroit. I found her. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a decaying building on the outskirts of Detroit, the kind of cheap rental with dark hallways and the smell of dampness clinging to every wall. Local police had arrived ahead of them, securing the area and containing the scene, and when Marcus's car stopped outside, Wren jumped out before the wheels had fully stopped rolling. She had flown from Chicago to Detroit the moment Marcus called, without sleep, without food, with only one thought spinning relentlessly in her mind. Ivy, her sister, and after 9 years she was about to see her again. That hope came tangled with fear. Fear of what she would find. Fear of what 9 years had done to her sister. Fear that the Ivy she remembered, the 15-year-old girl with the bright smile and dream-filled eyes, no longer existed. Marcus followed a step behind, silent, steady, a solid shadow at her back, and he had been that way the entire flight, not questioning, not comforting, simply present, letting her know she wasn't alone, which was all Wren needed. They climbed the narrow stairs, past walls streaked with peeling paint, and stopped in front of apartment 37, where an officer nodded and opened the door. The apartment was suffocatingly small, a single room with a dilapidated kitchenette, a crooked twin bed, and a window sealed off with cardboard. No natural light, no fresh air, only darkness and the stench of despair. And in the corner of the room, a woman sat curled up on the floor. She was so thin, her shoulder bones pressed sharply against the torn fabric of her shirt, hair that had once been glossy black, now brittle and tangled, eyes that had once shone now hollow like bottomless pits. But Wren knew instantly. It was Ivy, her sister, after 9 years. "Ivy," Wren whispered, her voice catching in her throat as she stepped forward slowly, like approaching a wounded animal, afraid any sudden movement would send her sister spiraling into panic. "It's me. It's your sister. It's Wren." The woman on the floor looked up, eyes landing on Wren without recognition. No spark of memory, no flicker of joy, only confusion and emptiness. "I don't have a sister," Ivy said, her voice rough as if she hadn't spoken to anyone in years. "Go away. Leave me alone." It felt like a blade drove straight into Wren's chest, and she had prepared for many things, for seeing Ivy hurt, broken, scarred, but she hadn't prepared for not being recognized, for her sister looking at her like a stranger. "Ivy," Wren knelt down, forcing her voice to stay steady. "You do have a sister. I'm here. I've been looking for you for 9 years. 9 years. I never stopped." Ivy recoiled, pressing herself into the corner, as if trying to dissolve into the shadows. "Go away," she repeated, panic rising in her voice. "I don't want to go outside. It's dangerous out there. They'll take me again. It's safe here. No one touches me here. Go away." Wren understood, too well. Understood that Ivy had been caged for so long, broken so deeply, that the cage had become the only safety she knew, that freedom had become more terrifying than captivity, that she had forgotten she once had another life, a family, a sister who loved her. Wren didn't try to pull her up or argue. Instead, she sat down on the floor a few steps away and simply stayed. "It's okay," she said gently, like speaking to a frightened child. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm here with you. I'll sit right here until you're ready. No rush, no pressure. I'm just here." Silence stretched on, Marcus watching from the doorway, with an expression Wren couldn't read, saying nothing, not interfering, knowing this was a battle Wren had to fight alone. Then, after a long stretch of time Wren couldn't measure, Ivy spoke, her voice small and distant, as if echoing from somewhere deep inside a crushed soul. "Do you remember the song Mom used to sing?" Tears welled in Wren's eyes, because she did remember, clearly, the lullaby their mother sang to them every night before sleep, before the car accident that took her life, before 2 orphaned girls were thrown into foster care and ground down by the world. She remembered, and she began to sing, her voice trembling, uneven, imperfect, but the melody unchanged, the memory intact, the love still there. Ivy listened, and something shifted in her empty eyes. A tiny, fragile light, like a candle flickering in a storm. And then the tears came, one by one, streaming down her hollow cheeks onto the filthy floor of the apartment, the first time Ivy had cried in many years. "Wren," Ivy whispered, her voice like a child who'd finally found her way home after being lost in the dark for too long. "Sister." Wren said nothing. She simply opened her arms, and Ivy, after 9 years, finally stepped into them and let herself be held. Marcus waited outside the apartment for 3 hours. He didn't rush her, didn't knock to ask questions, didn't send anyone in to check. He simply stood there with his back against the peeling hallway wall, eyes lowered to his phone while his mind was somewhere else entirely. He thought about Catherine. He thought about Emma and Lily. He thought about what he had almost lost and what the woman inside that room had truly lost for 9 long years. He didn't know what Wren had said to her sister, didn't know how much they had cried or how long they had held each other. He only knew that when the door finally opened, Wren stepped out with red-rimmed eyes but a gaze brighter than anything he'd ever seen, and beside her stood Ivy Sullivan, thin and trembling, but standing, having walked out of the room, having stepped out of the cage. Marcus didn't speak. He simply gave a small nod and opened the car door for them. Ivy hesitated at the threshold, wild eyes scanning the interior like it might be another trap. Wren squeezed her sister's hand gently. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm here. No one's going to hurt you anymore." Ivy looked at her sister, then at Marcus, then back at her sister, and after a moment she nodded and climbed into the car. The drive back to Chicago took nearly 5 hours. Marcus drove in silence, eyes fixed on the road stretching ahead, occasionally glancing at the rearview mirror where Wren and Ivy sat in the back. Ivy had fallen asleep against her sister's shoulder, her gaunt face still tense even in sleep. Wren stayed awake, one arm wrapped around her sister, the other gently smoothing her brittle hair the way their mother used to when they were children. "Thank you," Wren said softly, so quietly Marcus almost didn't hear her. He didn't look back. "Don't," Don't thank me. Ren was silent for a moment, then spoke again. I mean it. You helped me find her. You did things you didn't have to do. You don't owe me anything. Marcus tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his jaw hardening. I mean it too, he replied evenly. Don't thank me. You saved my daughters before I did anything. You risked your life for them while I was sitting in New York ignoring every sign. If anyone owes anyone here, it's me who owes you, not the other way around. Silence settled between them. Ren didn't know what to say. She wasn't used to someone standing on her side, wasn't used to help that didn't demand a price. Her life had taught her that everything came with a cost, that every kindness carried conditions. But Marcus Blackwood met her eyes in the mirror without asking for anything at all, and that left her unsure how to respond. After a long while, Marcus spoke again, his voice lighter, though he still didn't turn around. Where are you going to go now, you and your sister? Ren looked down at Ivy sleeping on her shoulder. She was 24 years old, yet in Ren's arms she felt as small as the 15-year-old girl she'd lost and found again after 9 years of hell. I don't know, Ren admitted quietly. I never thought past finding her. I only thought about the search, never about what came after. Marcus drove on in silence, passing a sign that marked their entry into Illinois, and when the lights of Chicago began to rise on the horizon, he finally spoke. You can stay, he said, not as an invitation and not as a command, just a statement of fact. Both of you, until you figure out what you want. The house is big enough. And the kids? He hesitated for a second before continuing. The kids ask about you. Ren looked up at the mirror, meeting Marcus's eyes for a brief moment before he turned back to the road. She didn't know if it was the right step. She only knew that for the first time in many years, someone was offering her a place to go. Not a job to complete, not a mission to finish, just a place to return to. Ren looked down at her sleeping sister, then out the window where Chicago was slowly emerging in the dawn light, and she nodded even though Marcus couldn't see her. Okay, she said, her voice soft but steady. We'll stay. Marcus didn't answer, but Ren saw his shoulders ease slightly. It wasn't an invitation, it was an acknowledgement, and sometimes acknowledgement was all a person needed to begin again. 3 months passed like a dream Ren hardly dared to believe was real. Spring had come to Chicago, bringing warm breezes and golden sunlight across the wide gardens of the Blackwood estate, and for the first time in many years, children's laughter filled a house that had once lived in silence. Emma and Lily played on the green lawn, chasing dandelion seeds drifting on the wind. They no longer moved like shadows. They ran, they shouted, they fell into the grass and laughed until they couldn't breathe. Sometimes they still startled at sudden noises. Sometimes they still searched for permission before doing the smallest things. But those moments grew fewer, and the laughter grew louder. Grace Sullivan had returned to the estate as head housekeeper, but she wasn't alone anymore. Ren was there beside her, helping with the children, with the house, with all the quiet details a place needs to become a home. She wasn't a maid, and she wasn't a guest. No one defined what she was, and she didn't need them to. She was simply there, and that was enough. Ivy was undergoing treatment at a specialized rehabilitation center outside Chicago, the best care Marcus's money could buy. Progress was slow, painful, filled with setbacks and sleepless nights, but there was progress. Once a week, Ren visited her sister. Sometimes Ivy recognized her instantly, sometimes it took a few minutes, but every time, when Ivy finally smiled and said her name, Ren knew the 9-year search had been worth it. Sometimes Marcus drove her to the center. He never went inside, not once. He simply waited in the car for hours, working on his laptop or making calls. Ren didn't know why he did it. She didn't ask, and he didn't explain. That was how they worked. No questions, no explanations, just being there for each other in ways words couldn't hold. Marcus had changed too. Not completely and not suddenly. He was still the head of Chicago's underworld empire, still cold and ruthless to the outside world, still holding closed-door meetings with Dante that Ren knew better than to question. But at home, he was different. He came home for dinner with the children every night, without exception. He sat at the head of the table, listening to Emma talk about school, listening to Lily describe the picture she'd drawn that day. He wasn't good with children. His questions were sometimes awkward, his responses sometimes slow. But he tried, and for the girls, that effort was enough. Every night before bed, he read to Emma and Lily. Ren overheard it once while passing their room. Marcus's deep, steady voice reading about princesses and distant castles, sounding so unfamiliar that she stopped just to make sure she wasn't imagining it. It was the voice of a man learning how to be a father again after 2 years of freezing himself shut, the voice of someone trying to mend what had been broken. One weekend afternoon, sunlight streamed through the living room windows while Emma helped Ren fold laundry, and the girl suddenly looked up with curious blue eyes and asked if Ren was her dad's girlfriend. Ren nearly dropped the shirt in her hands, feeling heat rush to her face as she opened her mouth and found no words. Just then, Marcus walked into the room with a cup of coffee and stopped in the doorway, and Ren knew he'd heard the question. Their eyes met for a brief, heavy moment. Marcus didn't answer, didn't confirm or deny anything. He simply looked at Ren with gray eyes. She still couldn't read after 3 months under the same roof, then turned and walked toward his study as if nothing had happened. Emma shrugged and went back to folding, already forgetting the question. But Ren didn't. She watched Marcus disappear behind the door and wondered where she stood in that house, in that man's life, in a story she wasn't sure she wanted to belong to. Some things don't need to be defined, she told herself. They just need to exist. But that night, lying alone in the room Marcus had given her, she found herself unable to stop thinking about Emma's question and the way Marcus had looked at her before turning away. That morning, the Blackwood estate was filled with spring sunlight and the smell of toasted bread drifting from the large kitchen. Ren stood at the stove, turning eggs in a pan while listening to Emma and Lily's laughter echo down the staircase. This was a task she had chosen for herself, not because anyone asked or assigned it, but because she wanted to, because for the first time in her life she had a place she could call home. Small feet came running into the kitchen, and 2 familiar figures rushed forward to hug her legs. "Ren, Ren," Emma cried, blue eyes shining. "Dad promised to take us to the park today. Are you coming with us?" Ren looked down at the 2 upturned faces waiting for her answer and felt her heart warm in a way she didn't know how to name. 3 months earlier, these children had looked at her with fear and suspicion, and now they looked at her like someone who belonged here, who belonged to them. She didn't know how to answer, and she glanced toward the kitchen doorway where Marcus stood leaning against the frame with a cup of coffee in his hand. He didn't tell her to go or not to go, didn't order or invite her. He only looked at her for a moment and said in his usual even voice that the car would leave at 10 o'clock. Nothing more. It wasn't an invitation and it wasn't a command, just information. But Ren understood, and Marcus knew she did. They looked at each other for a brief moment without speaking and without needing to. There were no promises between them, no declarations of love, no romantic gestures like in the movies. Only 2 people who had lost too much and hurt for too long and had somehow found each other in the dark. "I'll be ready," Ren said softly. Marcus nodded and turned away. But before he stepped out, he stopped, and without turning back, he spoke more quietly than usual, as if the words were harder than any order he'd ever given in his empire. "Ren, thank you for staying." It was the first time he'd thanked anyone besides Dante. The first time he'd admitted that someone's presence mattered to him. Ren didn't answer. She only smiled even though he couldn't see it. Emma tugged at her hand, delighted. "Ren, you're smiling." "Yeah," Ren said, looking down at the 2 children holding her hands. "I am." Outside the window, Chicago woke beneath the spring sun. Somewhere in the city, Ivy was learning how to trust the world again, one day at a time, one step at a time. Somewhere in this estate, 2 children were learning how to laugh again after months of living in fear. And somewhere within these walls, 2 adults who had lost too much were learning to allow themselves hope. No one said love, no one promised forever, but they stayed, and sometimes staying is enough. This wasn't a happy ending in the way people usually imagine. There was no wedding, no kiss beneath fireworks, no declaration of eternal love. This was simply a new beginning, a chance to heal, a small hope planted among the ruins of the past. And sometimes that's all we need. The story of Marcus, Ren, Emma, Lily, and Ivy reminds us that fear grows in silence, but hope grows when someone dares to speak, that it's never too late to protect the people we love, that redemption doesn't come from erasing the past but from choosing a different future, and that family isn't always defined by blood. Sometimes family is the people who choose to stay when the world tries to pull them apart. Thank you all for listening to today's story. And if this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with friends and loved ones, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more moving stories like this. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What did this story make you think about in your own life? Have you ever had to fight to protect someone you love? Have you ever had to learn how to forgive yourself for mistakes in the past? Share with us in the comments below. We read every single one and truly value the stories you share. Finally, we wish everyone watching this video good health, a joyful life, and peace each day. And no matter how difficult life becomes, please remember that there is always hope ahead and you're never alone. Thank you for walking this journey with us. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.